So Letitia James is at it again. This is going to be the summer of the ICE crash outs. Everyone is fighting over what's going on with immigration issues. It's a big problem, and Letitia James is back at it this time investigating New York cops who are apparently alleged working with ICE. Meanwhile, while she's under fire for alleged mortgage fraud and sexual misconduct in her office from her chief of staff and wire fraud and other issues. So there's a lot of things happening. Obviously, crime is still an issue in New York. There's still issues here. Letitia James is going after the sheriffs who may have answered a call from Trump's Department of Security. Is this justice? Is this political theater? Or this is just a distraction from her own scandal? So today we're gonna break this down beat by beat. This is an article from the New York Post. This came out 2 days ago. It's just, this is crazy because this is about law, power, and the biggest game of political dodgeball that you're going to see in 2025. So let's check this out real quick. As you can see, State Attorney General Letitia James is conducting a misconduct probe of a New York local law enforcement agency, helping the Trump administration crack down on illegal immigration, the Post has learned. The AG's office asked Oswego County Sheriff Don Hilton for documents outlining any cooperation between local law enforcement officials and government agencies, including immigrations and customs enforcement, that's ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and Homeland Security. So here you go. Before we dive more into this, I just want to address a wild fact that I think most people may not realize, or maybe they do realize. I think that's why there's so much issues back and forth with immigration. Immigration is the only area in the law where the states like New York can actually pass orders and laws prohibiting police from cooperating with federal authorities. I sat back and thought about it. I'm like, is there any other crime where the state officials can basically say, hey, cops, you're not allowed to cooperate with authorities? It's like, remember those movies you see where there's some kind of action going on, and let's say for instance, it's Die Hard, right? And there's the local cops are already there, they're on the scene, but then the federal authorities may come in and say, we are in charge now, right? So if the feds show up with a warrant for drugs, guns, terrorism, you name it, local cops will help, no issue. They roll out with joint task force, sting ops, the works. But when it comes to immigration, suddenly it's like, sorry, ICE, we don't do that here. And that all traces back to 2017 when then Governor Andrew Cuomo signed an executive order restricting New York law enforcement from assisting ICE unless there's a judicial warrant, which is hilarious because our comptroller, New York City comptroller, got arrested for asking for a warrant. So that whole thing is kind of crazy.
I'd like to see the warrant, and I will let us go. Take him in. Let's go. You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Sir, you don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. You don't have I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here in the hallway. I asked to see the judicial warrant. By asking for a judicial warrant?
Kathy Hochul, the now governor, has continued that policy. So this idea was to keep immigrant communities from fearing local police. But it has created a bizarre legal wall where civil immigration enforcement becomes the one area where cops are told to look the other way, even if the person has a criminal record. So that leads to something even more dangerous, criminal migrants being released back into the streets. ICE will issue a detainer. Local cops know who they have in custody, but state policy says that they can't hold the person. So what happens is they walk. And we're not talking about people jaywalking or overstaying a visa here. We're talking about folks who have been convicted of serious crimes, sometimes extremely violent stuff. If you checked out the testimony on Capitol Hill from many of the mayors who are running sanctuary cities, they were getting hit with some heavy questions because there's victims that have been harmed by people who had criminal records but were released back into society. So basically, they just end up being released right back into the same community instead of being handed over to ICE. Why? Because state policy says we do not cooperate with immigration enforcement. And that's not a suggestion, that's a law in New York. So even ICE sends a former detainer and says, yo, we need to get this guy. The sheriff's hands are tied. So what happens, boom, the door opens, they walk back into the neighborhoods, back in the same spaces that they already caused harm. And yeah, a lot of them do reoffend. So this thing is a complete mess. So it's not just dangerous, it just seems infuriating. It's confusing. So how do you explain to the families who have been victims the second time around? How does a cop justify letting someone go if ICE wanted them? Just because Albany said don't. That brings us to this circus right here with Letitia James. New York's top law enforcement officer isn't going after necessarily dirty cops or corrupt politicians, even though it seems like allegedly she is one of those corrupt politicians. She's investigating sheriffs for basically working with ICE, helping ICE. And many people believe just doing their jobs, something law enforcement does all the time with other federal agencies. The DA, sure, FBI, of course, but ICE, now that's political. That's a problem. Why is political? Because, of course, you may already know, Letitia James and Donald Trump have this long beef. You know what's going on between the two. Some people are calling her the progressive Avenger, targeting Trump and his associates in case after case after case. And this latest move to investigate sheriffs for working with federal immigration agents fits neatly into that pattern. And on the other side, there's Trump's Department of Homeland Security, who continue to push federal immigration enforcement. Even under legal and political pressure, DHS maintains its stance, has every right to request cooperation from local law enforcement when it comes to enforcing federal immigration laws. Their position is very straightforward. If someone is in the country illegally and commits a crime, they should be detained and handed over to ICE, full stop. So in the middle of all this situation is local sheriffs. So the Oswego County's Don Hilton, who are just trying to do their jobs, their goal is public safety. If a federal agency like ICE contacts them with a detainer request, their instinct is to help. It's what law enforcement has always done, cooperate across jurisdictions to enforce the law and keep communities safe. But now that cooperation could get them subpoenaed. So see right here, the Attorney General is conducting an investigation pursuant to the New York Executive Law 75-3 and has reasonable cause to believe that Oswego County Sheriff's Office has information relevant to that investigation. This is from Lillian Marquez, Deputy Borough Chief of the AG's Law Enforcement Misconduct Investigative Office. That's a long title. And she wrote in the June 11th letter obtained by the Post. AG demands that the sheriff turn over any documents or information about ICE detainer requests and detection, apprehension, and detention of people who have already violated immigration law. All communications between or among any member of the sheriff's office and any member of Homeland Security or its sub-agencies, including CBP. The ICE at traffic stops is also requested. The spokesman from the AG's office said that the Post's initial article of the letter missed important facts, including the focus of the document request. What did they miss? I don't know. The problem is this is just a progressive wing of New York politics. This group has been instrumental in pushing the sanctuary city policies statewide. They believe that any cooperation with ICE undermines the trust between immigrant communities and the police. Their pressure is felt not just in legislation, but in legal expectations placed on public officials. So with their backing, Attorney General James feels emboldened to act against any perceived violations of these sanctuary norms. So the Office of the Attorney General does not target New York counties for cooperating with federal government. The Law Enforcement Misconduct Investigative Office review matters concerning potential violations of New York's civil rights, the spokesman said. It is wrong to inaccurately speculate about our office's ongoing work with local law enforcement, especially when it comes from extremist politicians with partisan agendas. You know, some people believe that the AG has extremist political views with partisan agendas. I mean, they're going back and forth with Trump. So I don't know about all of that. But I think the battle lines are clear. On one side, you have the federal immigration law enforcement. On the other, a progressive state government drawing a line in the sand. And who's getting caught in the middle are the sheriffs, men and the women who are just trying to do their jobs, being treated like suspects for answering the phone when ICE calls. So the scope of this request includes everything, right? Talking about traffic stop data, talking about the communications between agencies, even officer training materials involving immigration enforcement. So this is not a courtesy check-in. This seems like a legal summons backed by the full authority of the New York executive law that allows the Attorney General to investigate misconduct by law enforcement. Critics argue that this just brings more dangerous individuals being released instead of being handed over to ICE, simply because the state refuses to cooperate. To James and her allies, however, it's about civil rights, due process, and protecting vulnerable communities. But what raises questions is this move wasn't limited to just Oswego County. Nassau County, located on Long Island, has already received a similar letter earlier this year. And insiders familiar with this situation say that other counties across the state are going to be next. What's forming here is a pattern. Coordinated legal campaign aimed squarely at undermining local and federal cooperation on immigration enforcement. So this is not one-off audits. There's signal to a broader legal and political chess match here. And if you guys may not know this, if you don't live in New York State, that you think that the entire state is progressive, the entire state is liberal. But I would argue no. I would say that New York City is very liberal. But once you leave the city limits, you go upstate New York, a lot of areas are more conservative than liberal. So it's a common misconception that the entire state is liberal. This is definitely a political chess match going after more of the conservative folks outside of the city to see if they're doing anything to undermine immigrants' rights. So this is just more of the back and forth between Letitia James and the political, I guess, the progressive left against Trump and the conservatives. And immigration is going to be the hot button issue for the rest of the summer. I mean, probably for the rest of Trump's term. And they're going to be going back and forth. And this helps Letitia James in one way to continue to be the martyr, right? To be the progressive hero fighting for the causes for progressives, despite the fact that she has a lot of problems herself. And people are going to notice this and say, you know what, if I'm on her side, if you say, for instance, the progressive left, they're saying, you know what, she's being targeted. All this mortgage fraud stuff, this is just a distraction. They're trying to take her down. Even though if you look at the paperwork, you look at some of the evidence, it shows that she was not honest in what she was doing. But she needs that public support because yes, she's a lawyer and she's supposed to be the top cop, but this is a political position and she's playing politics so she can continue to keep her position. But let me know what you guys think about this situation in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.